I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Area for July the 7th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, subject pressure or mine alone, and when making decisions of any tropical cyclones, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So across the tropics today, we have a few systems that we're going to talk about. We're going to start in the East Pacific again, and we've got a very similar scenario that we had with Adrian and Beatrice last week, where we have a broad circulation here forming off the coastline of Mexico, followed by a secondary system which is also likely to develop. No low pressure system in this, but as the system comes northwest alongside the first system, they're both likely to become tropical cyclones. Now, the difference here, particularly with the second system compared to Beecher's, the system is likely to remain offshore, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But I'm going to start off with the first system. Here's a close-up visible satellite loop, and you can see if you look at the low-level cloud field, if you look off the offshore Mexico, we've got some east-southeasterly winds rotating around to be generally easterly winds on the northern side. These wrap around on the western side of this general circulation down to the southern side. And if you look at the southern side of this circulation down here, you can see some westerly winds coming in, and those wrap around towards the northern side. So in this general pattern, you get a general outlook of a circulation, very broad circulation, but generally like that. It's elongated fairly significantly, but it is a general broad area of low pressure. Now, there is some maybe signs of a little bit of a vortex taking shape in part of this, and we can see that perhaps here on the southern side of it, you see perhaps some increased rotation in the cloud field there. And this is also confirmed by a high pass that we got earlier in the day. Here's that overall broad circulation, the general trough axis. I'll get a better color, extending onto the northeastern side of that. But we have this general vortex here indicated by this pass. Now, the question is, will this overall become the dominant circulation? And given that we're seeing perhaps some increased rotation here in the convection over the system, if the convection manages to organize over that center more, and we start to see that sustaining for quite a long time, we can see that take shape, and eventually that may well become the dominant circulation and may allow the system to become a tropical cyclone. Now, here's a GFS 500 millibar flow. This is about 36 hours out. This is Saturday night local time. And here's the system depicted by the model here. You can see it really has not moved much, but by this point, the system is going to start moving under the influence of a ridge to its north. And this ridge is going to be the big story for both this system and the system behind it. And this system, the first system, I would say, is going to struggle a little bit with sea surface temperatures. Remember, Adrian did come through here just last week, and the oceanic temperatures were they were warm, but they weren't warm to a great depth. They weren't very deep in the sense that oceanic heat content wasn't too high. Now that Adrian went over that, so you would imagine there would be some level of decreased oceanic heat content there. That may cause a little bit of a struggle for the system. It's possible that the system gets maybe close to hurricane intensity before the sea surface temperatures really start to die down. Now, remember that gradient is roughly here in the sea surface temperature plot, so the system really will not have too much time to intensify. But given, say, the system is formidable here and has consolidated that center, it's possible that it could reach that level of perhaps getting close to hurricane status. We've seen surprises before. Adrian surprised us as well with its Category 2 peak. Now we're going to talk about the second system now, as there really wasn't much to discuss here. So here's 5 days out. This is Wednesday morning local time. Here is the first system. You can see it has moved into those cooler sea surface temperatures and is now weakening as it follows that subtropical ridge flow. Now, here's a secondary system. Notice it's very similar. It's very broad in general. And at this point on the model, it is developing into a tropical cyclone by that point. And notice where it is. It is further away from that gradient of sea surface temperatures, degrading. So, given enough time, if the system does develop such as the GFS depicts it, we'd see the system potentially getting towards hurricane status more quicker, or rather, in a better sense, it's more likely to become a hurricane than the first system is. Now, here's a sounding over the system from the GFS. You can see shear is generally low. We have a fairly uniform flow aloft. There is a little bit of shear with the southeasterly flow in the low levels, generally easterly shear in the mid to upper levels. So that is creating a little bit of a shear, but in general, with a broad system like that, it would be likely more resilient to that shear, and we would likely see intensification regardless of that system, or regardless of the shear. Now, alongside that, this is the steering flow as well. So you can see, unlike beaches where we had a push towards the coastline of Mexico with beaches, this system has a push in general away from Mexico entirely. And that's a factor of that ridge that I talked about. Here's the 500 millibar flow on the GFS, and you can see that very strong ridge. It has strengthened quite a significant amount, and this is going to keep the system out to sea. And this is also going to be a very significant heat event for the southwestern US. I'm sure a lot of us in the US have heard about that. Now, you also will probably notice this little thing on the GFS. I just want to point out that this is a likely feedback issue. It's called convective feedback, and this is a common issue with the GFS around South America and Central America, which is where the system originated from. This is also the first time the model has shown it. No other models show it. This really is not anything of concern. This is just a little thing that the GFS is having a little fun with, not anything really to be concerned about. Now here's the National Hurricane Center graphic, and you can see the first system, they're giving about 90% odds of the system developing, and I have to agree. This system looks to be consolidating a little bit better now on satellite, and it is very likely to become a tropical cyclone. They've got actually 90% in 2 days. This is the system that's likely to form this weekend. Now the system behind it, you could see it on the satellite picture at the beginning of the video. This is it right here. Notice there's really no defined circulation there, no organization to the convection, and that really is expected to remain the case. That's why the National Hurricane Center only gives us about a 20% chance of developing over the next 2 days. This is more of a next week development time frame for this system. But again, the good news for this system in particular, unlike beaches, this system is going to stay out to sea away from Mexico. Though, keep in mind, with these systems out to sea, you could still get some higher surf and perhaps some rip current danger along the beaches, so make sure you stay in tune to lifeguards there and coast guards, as they'll have the best information on what you should do at the beach. Now, we're done with the East Pacific, and really the next area we're going to be looking at across the world is the West Pacific. Now, across really the whole world, since the Atlantic died down in mid-June, we've really been very quiet. The North Indian Ocean has been very quiet. The Western Pacific has also been very quiet. Now, this is a map showing contours of rising and sinking air, whereas in the green areas you have the rising air, which helps the convection grow, which is why we have our two systems forming in the East Pacific, where the orange areas indicate sinking air. You can also see that pretty well in the Atlantic. That's why the MDR is a little bit more quiet now, as you'd expect in July, compared to what it was a couple of weeks ago. Now, this in the East Pacific is what we call, I believe, a Kelvin wave, which is progressing through the basin, and this is helping to favor the development of two systems. But this main blob of green here is what we call the Madden-Julian oscillation. It's a general area of rising thunderstorm activity which progresses around the globe throughout the year. And you can see that this is pretty potent here on the model. This goes out 7 days, so you can see that general consensus from the GFS ensemble, at least, of increased rising air motion over the West Pacific. Now, we are seeing some indications on the GFS, so we could potentially see some development. This system tracks generally near the Mariana Islands and tracks northwest, and we are seeing that the GFS parent model is developing a tropical cyclone, and you can also see a lot of those members of the GFS are also trying to develop that system, quite a few members, in fact. And we see this system eventually get towards the southern Japanese islands. But the GFS is really alone in this idea. We do not see much guidance from, say, the European model showing this, though that could be a factor of maybe the European being a bit too weak with this system. So it's certainly something to watch. Notice this is not even at 5 days out. This is just about 5 days out. Here on the model, we've got something trying to develop in the West Pacific. So just keep that in mind. And given the rising air motion that we see in the GFS model here, it makes sense that we would at least see maybe something trying to develop. And also, I did take a sounding from the GFS parent model. The conditions look fairly favorable for this. Mainly an issue may be sea surface temperatures as it heads into this region. As it's only July, remember, and we're not into peak season months, but we are heading into that time frame. We are getting closer to August and September, the peak months across the entire northern hemisphere. So if you're looking at this and you have not really prepared too much for hurricane season, now is the time before we get into peak hurricane season. Remember, it only takes one storm to make a season historic. But that's all that I've got to talk about today. Again, recapping the East Pacific, 2 systems likely to form, and they will likely stay out to sea further away from Mexico, like Beatrice was. And you can see, again, as these systems track offshore, we could have some increased surf and rip current issues along the coastlines. To see your local coast guards for information on that. And I'll have future updates as well in the East Pac systems and any further updates that will be required for this potential West Pacific system as well. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.